AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host, Claire Kelly, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
So we're with Niall O'Connor. Niall O'Connor is the CTO of Genospace. Niall, very welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
So Niall, tell us about how an Irish guy is in Boston and now a CTO at Genospace.
I started my career in Galway working for a company called Fidelity Investments, and I graduated from NUI Galway and straight into their graduate program. After about a year working for them in Ireland, I had the opportunity to come to the US, to Boston specifically, and work in web security. And so obviously being in the financial services industry, web security was of paramount importance. And from there, I really got to see what it was like to develop software at enormous scale. Back in 2004, 2005, when I began working there, we were dealing with a large internet site, Fidelity.com. And at that time, we were servicing millions of requests a day, which doesn't sound big by Google standards, but was pretty significant at the time. After about 4 years working there, I decided to start to see where I could apply my computational skills more broadly, and I started getting interested in bioinformatics. And being where I am in Boston, I was able to take some classes in computational methods for the interpretation of genomic sequences at Harvard. And from there, I really platformed into a career in life sciences. So I started working at Dana-Farber, which is a large academic medical center here in Boston. And I started working in a computational biology lab. And that really gave me my first insight into how computational methods can be applied to the interpretation of life sciences data. I saw a huge amount of opportunity there, just with my background. And I stayed for a couple of years at Dana-Farber before starting out on my own with a couple of my colleagues and starting Genospace. And Genospace was really created with the idea of democratizing access to analytical methods for the interpretation of both molecular information, that is the sequence, the information encoded in the sequence of your genome, and clinical information. And so we really focused on creating tools at the intersection of both of those worlds, because prior to that, you had epidemiologists that would look at clinical information, and you would have molecular scientists that would look at molecular data, and never the twain should meet. And so Genospace was really created to bring those two worlds together to drive insight into how molecular information and molecular data can impact clinical outcomes.
So give us an example of how that kind of precision and kind of cutting straight to it, that you can add more value and insight to a kind of a health patient or kind of a clinician.
If you were unfortunate enough to develop cancer, the modern or the standard of care today is typically multiple regimens of chemotherapy. And so, as we know, chemotherapy affects every cell in your body, and that's why your hair falls out, for example. It has enormous toxicity risks, and very often it's not that effective. So what we seek to do in genomic medicine and molecular science is find the pieces of your genome that have changed and that have led to the development of a tumor. So quite simply to put it, if you have a melanoma on your skin, something told that cell to turn into a melanoma rather than a skin cell. And so what we like to do, or what we want to do, is to investigate what were the changes that caused that tumor to develop. And in cancer, very often it's damage to a particular gene. And these genes often have function. And the function of oncogenes are typically tumor suppressor or damage repair genes. And so once you determine what function has been lost that allowed that tumor to develop, you can target those variations with drugs. And these modern drugs are effective because they only target the cells that they're designed to work with. So you are not going to see some of the side effects that you see with chemotherapy because they're not affecting every cell in your body. They're only designed and targeted to affect cells that are involved in cancer or in the development of that specific tumor.
So what type of challenges did you need to overcome to kind of get that ready? Because when I think of kind of health data, I just think of, I suppose, just an awful lot of cleaning up of data sets, and the data isn't necessarily all in the same format, so it can be kind of very difficult to obtain some certain insights because certain doctors might be recording certain things in a different way, and it might must be kind of a unified way to control that. That's just the thing that comes to my mind. Was there any other kind of challenges that you needed to overcome?
I mean, the challenges of performing any analysis in healthcare are immense. When I think back to our time at Dana-Farber, we were really doing it on a bespoke kind of research scale. So you're talking about getting medical records and having humans look through these medical records and coding them appropriately by hand. And as you said, these records are coming from a variety of different sources. Sometimes it's from the EMR, sometimes it's physician notes, sometimes it's picking up the phone and calling the patient. But when you're talking about it in a clinical context and what we're applying today, you really have to be able to do this at scale, and that's what Genospace are uniquely positioned to do. When we set out to solve some of the problems, we built infrastructure that would allow for a real dexterity with dealing with incoming data sets. So whether we're pulling data directly out of an EMR, we have tooling that allows us to basically go in and code for any element that we see in that document. So if you send us a continuity of care document, we're aware of the fields in that document, and we have we're set up to deal with that. But equally, if you have your own spreadsheet that you've assembled yourself, we're able to recognize the signature of that spreadsheet and then start to code for the elements in that. And we've really adapted our company around hiring in data scientists that help with that coding process and that allow these documents to be extracted and transformed. And that's only really the start of it. So once you're able to start recognizing these documents coming in, recognizing fields coming in, and handling them at scale, then it comes to some of the analysis steps. The problem in healthcare is there's a sparsity with every record, right? Not every patient has been tested. Not every patient is at the same point in their care. And so what we seek to do is provide interfaces where any member of the care team, as they go along, as the patient navigates the health system, can augment the record and add information and context that they know about. And it's important for regulatory purposes to kind of separate out, what information has been committed to the EMR and what information has been augmented by the different people in the care team. And so that helps with some of the sparsity of these records. And then at the real kind of crude part of it is we also employ just abstractors to help add to the record and find out more information. And that's the kind of we do that in a very targeted way as well. So we're not going to abstract every single patient. We're going to do it on a case-by-case basis. Yeah,
because in some ways you always think of tech doing an awful lot of this, automating it. But, there is still a very valid role for an abstractor to come in and actually just find and go and get that data and actually kind of manually put that together. There is no kind of silver bullet. And tell us a little bit about kind of building a team, leadership, the importance of that, because when I think of building a data team, it's probably going to be a little bit different than building your kind of standard Java engineering team where there's so many different knowns versus the unknowns of research and kind of getting that infrastructure correctly and then trying to manage data scientists, which I've been told is like herding cats. So there's loads of different perspectives on that. What's your thoughts on that, and kind of tips for people listening in?
When we started Genospace, I was engineer one. I came in the first day. I took the seats down off the tables and let off the alarm by accident. So I understand what it's like to come into an empty room and start to build from there. When we started out, it was never our intention to build a large data science team. The vision for the company was really to begin with building infrastructure components that data scientists could ultimately use. And for the first couple of years, that's what we did. We largely hired Java stack engineers with client-side abilities, and built all the applications and the components that we thought our customers would want. Once we started, starting customer projects and deploying our applications, we really started to see a gap between what our customers were able to do and what we thought that they should be able to do. And it was a real impedance mismatch to begin with. So we started to augment the delivery of our applications with some services, and that was basically data science services. So if a customer came along with a new research data set, our data science team was able to take that and start to transform it into a model that would be easily interpretable by a clinician or an epidemiologist or a non-biostatistician type user. And that was the model that we really started to build on. And we realized that our customers never really kind of caught up. They were always interested in kind of handing us the data set and then having our team actually kind of break that down and transform it. And from there on, we started to build tooling to support that type of engagement. We started then to grow. We were ultimately acquired by a large hospital network here in the United States, and they really liked the kind of ethos of the company, where we were building tooling, we were eating our own dog food by having our own team use the tools and transform the data sets, and then ultimately making it easier for their clinicians and physicians to do active research on a real world evidence data set. So from there on, we've continued to expand the team. We're doing more of the analysis now as well. So we're building not only analytical methods, but we're also producing novel research from the real world evidence data sets as well.
So was that a kind of a natural evolution, or did you take a kind of a strategic approach to how you were kind of conducting that?
I think it naturally evolved from commercial necessity. I think when you're a small company, you desperately need your customers to be successful with your applications, and so we were willing to do everything to make that happen. And we had experience in that as well. So it evolved from the necessity of commercial viability of our product, and now it's strategic importance. So we actively hire into these roles. It's not something that we consider that we can kind of walk away from. We think a part of every engagement is going to require some kind of early stage hand-holding from a data scientist, and then the more exciting things now are when we can actually help them with their analyses and actually be partners in that as well.
So now, where do you see that health organizations and patients, their kind of customer experience changing in the future with either your company or just the services in general in this space?
Well, in terms of precision medicine and the application of genomics to the treatment of cancer, I think we're really at the early stages of this. There is a long way to go in terms of what we can do to improve patient outcomes. So where I see Genospace growing to is that when a patient comes in to a physician for the very first time, that a molecular sequence is being done, that test result is going to our system, and we're we're responding with a really good characterization of what the treatment options are, using a variety of different factors. Now, today, there's not a lot of heavy regression going on or analytics going on with determining what treatment option a patient should be on. It's where we want to get to is this idea of, if you come in as a patient, that we were able to say these patients looked like you and they performed well on the drug, and therefore you should take this drug, right? That's ultimately where we want to go to. So to do that, you need a lot more information about a patient. You need to impute a lot of information about that patient. And so where I see us as Genospace developing is we're going to have a lot of micro models deployed to determine these factors that would select a patient for either a clinical trial or a treatment option. And so there's a huge amount of work to be done in that space. But I really think it's early stages. I think what we're doing right now, when we look back in 5 years' time, we're going to kind of laugh and kind of think how crude we were with our applications of both data science and also the strength that we can, the strength of predictive power, and about how are these drugs going to actually work for the patients.
Yes, it's changing so quickly. Now, just before we finish off, have you got any kind of stories of kind of patients where you kind of bring it to life? Where they've kind of had some benefits of this, because that'd be quite great to hear.
Yeah, I remember, about 5 years ago, we had just done our initial laboratory deployment of our software, and so we had been up and running for about 2 months, and one of the pathologists got back to us and wanted to share a story, and that was of this kid in Chicago. He was I think he was about 12 years of age. He had leukemia. He was refractory to therapy, meaning he hadn't responded to any of the rounds of chemotherapy that he'd been through. And we had recommended on one of our reports a drug that was suitable in a different disease or an indication, but his disease was molecularly similar for that drug, rather. And the drug was ultimately prescribed in an off-label scenario, and the patient started to respond to that therapy. So he had been through, I think, 4 or 5 rounds of chemotherapy, and this was the first application for this patient of a precision medicine, and he responded really, really well. And that's just kind of one of those stories that we hear, that it's amazing how we can really impact.
That's the kind of story that on a Monday morning and it's snowing and you're like, oh, I'm going to work.
Yeah.
The difference that you can have to that child, but also to their family, is just really, really inspiring. I'm speaking to Niall O'Connor. Niall is the CTO of Genospace, and you're listening to the AI in Action podcast. Niall, thank you so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a good pleasure.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. For more information, contact mark@alldus.com. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.